Board of Selectmen meeting to order for this Tuesday, January 19th. I wonder if we might take a moment of silence for our troops and for our public safety personnel at this time. Thank you all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Mulvey, do we have any public comment this evening?
There is indeed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. Is Karen here? Please, Karen, welcome. If you'd state your name and village for the record.
Karen
Welcome.
Gibides, Buzzards Bay. Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Gravino. I would like to publicly and for the record comment on my recent observations regarding future generation wind. I attended the Board of Health meeting last week and witnessed that board work diligently, seemingly with their hands tied behind their backs, to do the right thing. They had been notified recently that Town Attorney Robert Troy could not proceed with the legal matter requested of him until the Board of Health issued an order of noncompliance. Many of the Bourne residents who are affected by the industrial wind turbines off of Head of the Bay Road in Buzzards Bay were under the assumption that Mr. Troy was assembling an injunction to stop construction of this project. I was infuriated to learn that this was not the case, but that he did pass along the information to the Board of Selectmen that the Board of Health needed to act first. My understanding is that Mr. Troy has represented the town of Bourne for decades. After all of that time to get to know the town and its regulations, I can't believe it took him so long to pass along this information. You have a group of volunteers comprising the Board of Health who voted to pursue legal action back in November in regard to this energy plant. 34 days after that vote, Attorney Troy wrote a letter to you, the Selectmen, stating that the Board of Health hadn't properly issued an order of noncompliance. That letter was written 3 days before Christmas, when town staffing and office hours would be short. We all seem to agree that whenever an injunction is pursued, for whatever reason, time is of the essence. Also, I don't quite understand the rules and protocols of town government, but swiftness certainly is not one of them. Would it really have been so difficult for Mr. Troy to pick up a phone and let someone know that a step had been missed? Did we really need to lose another month's time? I'm concerned that either Mr. Troy does not have the expertise and motivation necessary to advise and act on this matter, or he's deliberately dragging his feet to sabotage the outcome, be it of his own accord or at the urging of others. We were informed that this matter would be handled behind closed doors as not to disclose legal strategy. What strategy could that be? We're no further ahead than we were 2 months ago. I witnessed the Board of Health work until midnight last week to assemble a document that would meet the legal requirements necessary to issue the order of noncompliance. This was a group of citizen volunteers, all with other commitments the following morning, struggling to compile a professional document, a document necessary in order for them to expediently meet the requirements of town bylaws, because they believe that Bourne residents are at risk without legal intervention, and this intervention was on hold pending the order. I would be willing to bet that a good municipal attorney could have had that document prepared in very short order, probably with a computerized template, and by asking only a few questions of the Board of Health. But the board did not have access to a good municipal attorney, and apparently Mr. Troy has stated that he will not communicate directly with the Board of Health. So, gentlemen, how long will this go on? We know that the detrimental effects of these industrial wind turbines will trespass upon the well-being of Bourne residents. We know that there are laws to prohibit this. We also know that with each passing day, construction continues, and so does the devaluing of the abutting Bourne properties. I urge you to open the lines of communications with the Board of Health, untie their hands, and give these hardworking volunteers access to legal advice without the encumbrance of bureaucracy. Give Attorney Troy the ability to advise the Board of Health directly, and if he is unwilling or unable, hire an attorney who will. and please do so now, as there is no time to waste. Even as we speak, Sandwich, Falmouth, Wareham may all be approving plans for another non-conforming industrial project which will be constructed on our borders before we wake up. You are allowing precedent to be set in regard to our borders and every other town's borders in Massachusetts. Please remember that we are people, and that a lack of funds should not be an excuse to allow harm to come to those people you are responsible for. I would like to assume that protocol and not money slowed Mr. Troy's communication to the Board of Health. Even so, I know that if I have knowledge of an action or an inaction that could be harmful to those I'm responsible for, protocol or not, I'm held accountable. If I took 34 days to let someone know about it, I wouldn't have a job. You've heard enough to know that lack of action by the town is creating a risk to the well-being of its residents. Please do the right thing. You have an obligation to do so. Thank you.
I'll remind the board members we are unable to debate comments made under open comments, but I will provide the following information: that there was a meeting held last week between the Board of Health, several Board of Health members, Board of Selectmen member, and town administrator, and both town councils. And there's another meeting scheduled next week. And thank you for your comments this evening. Are there any other public comments? Seeing none. Please take us through the correspondence. Mr. Bourne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Correspondence this week was relatively light, but still, we did have some important matters, including some volunteers stepping forward from our town. We have a letter of interest from Carol Lynch of Pocasset. She expressed her interest in wanting to serve on our capital outlay committee. We also received a letter of interest from Elizabeth Barlow from over in Buzzards Bay. She would like to consider appointment to our Human Services Committee. Then we have a notice here from Eversource Energy, and this is a notice with regard to some planned and scheduled vegetation maintenance work. It's on transmission right away, and this is on property that is on the in Sagamore on the Bourne Sandwich line. They submitted a sketch for us to peruse and be apprised of, that they would be pruning, side pruning, removal of hazard trees. And they would be notifying not only ourselves electronically by this document, by neighbors, abutters in the area by letters and door hanger notices. And then lastly, we also have a letter submitted by Detective John Doble. He's going to be retiring from the Bourne Police Department on April 1st of this year and has served us faithfully for 35 years, and we should probably thank him for many years of excellent service. And that concludes the correspondence.
Any comments or Mr. Picard?
Just if I may, that letter of the announcement of Detective Doble's retirement is going to be a tremendous loss of institutional knowledge, not to mention one of the hardest working and knowledgeable detectives in Massachusetts. So good luck, Sean. Enjoy your fishing on the canal.
Okay. The next item on the agenda this evening is the annual Town Administrator Fiscal 17 Budget Message. Mr. Guarino, I'll turn it over to you.
I have to tell you all a little funny. Some of you that have been around for a while would appreciate this. I did tell Mr. Picard this a little earlier. As I was waking up this morning, I had a dream, you know, one of those dreams you have before you wake up and you remember them. And the dream was that I couldn't find my budget message. And I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it, and I finally said, well, I'll look on it out via my cell phone, and I'll read it off of that. Of course, it was too small, I couldn't read it off of that. And who in the audience is calling me out? It wasn't who I thought it would be, which might be the vice chairman. It was Mr. Ford. So those of you that have been around a while will appreciate that Mr. Ford was in my thoughts even this morning as I prepare for a budget message.
And do you recall what I told you?
Yes.
I said, just look at your last 5 or 6 budget messages and change the date.
So there are a few changes in tonight's message. This is not verbatim to the text that you have in front of you, those of you that have picked up a draft of the budget message, which does follow a lot of the format from years past. But I will try, because I know Mr. Picard would like to move on to look at the budget. I will try to move as quickly as I can with this. But there are some things I think that need to be discussed. From a formal perspective, good evening, gentlemen. As required by the Bourne Charter, I'm forwarding the FY17 budget message. The main message in this introductory paragraph is simple and straightforward. The override vote in October 2015 failed. The override vote was close, but it failed. Cuts have been made. The municipality is functioning to the best of its ability, but is not functioning at its best. Town Hall is too short-staffed, as is the DPW. Other departments are barely hanging on, and until there is a new infusion of money, this downward trend will continue. The Bourne School Department is in need of help. All departments are doing more with less and have been creative in trying hard to offer as many services as possible under the current climate. Some changes have angered the citizenry. The truth is, no one is satisfied nor comfortable with the current state of program and service offerings. This includes elected leaders, municipal staff, administration, or the townspeople. There's been an outcry by many in the community that programs have been reduced, adjusted, or new fees have been attached. The fact of the matter is that these necessary changes were well forecasted, and warnings of necessary change were loud and clear by the leaders of this community for months before the vote. There seems to be a lot of cut the budget, but not my program talk out there. Some have called for large infusions of cash to the current budget due to some better than expected revenues being derived in the current year. While we often make minor adjustments to the budgets during the course of any given fiscal year, as we were proposing for the February town meeting, as a community, we have never spent great sums of money in a current fiscal year because of better than expected revenues. This cautious approach has been what's been able to keep the town afloat during the last set of turbulent times. The notion to spend, quote, new money in a year that it was received after budgets have been set is not sustainable in the long run. I remind you all that in October, the voters told us as municipal officials to live within our means. This was echoed at the autumn special town meeting. It is now our job to do so, popular or not. The proposed FY17 budget is designed to work within the confines of this reality. It is not a budget citizens are accustomed to. New revenue sources will need to be ascertained after this upcoming fiscal year. And to be clear, new sources, I mean another override attempt in the near future. The timing of such is to be determined by the Board of Selectmen, but certainly for fiscal 18. If this is not accomplished, staffing and programs within the municipal and education areas of Bourne will continue to fall and in some cases fail. It appears that the municipality will be forced to reduce budgets by an amount approximately $1.3 to $1.8 million in FY18, based on current projections and current policy constraints. This means that school and municipal departmental losses, with some departments likely to be eliminated. Police and fire this time around will also be subject to staffing reductions. I bring forward a balanced budget to you this evening, still with a bit of a blind spot. This budget message is earlier than the last several years, and the governor's budget is not due until the end of this month. It is anticipated that local aid will remain flat, which could mean a bit more or less actual cash in the coffers, depending on state assessments. There is some positive news. I'm pleased to say that the Upper Cape Regional Technical School assessments appear to be finally leveling out after many years of substantial increases. Additional cost controls and cost shifts in health insurance program will again prove to be helpful, and rates rise at less than the current industry standard by a substantial amount. Should new changes not be considered, this budget will be substantially out of balance, and further reductions to all town-funded departments, including schools, will have to be considered. Also, as a good sign, even with a reduced schedule at the community building, over 95% of the programs continue to be offered and intact. We can no longer rely on departmental turnbacks and our conservative approach to revenue estimates to manage the potholes we encounter in the budgetary process. I expect non-salary vacancy-related turnbacks to be extremely limited. I take pride in the fiscal prudence of town departments and town department heads. Our ability to manage budgets and create turnbacks, previously praised and championed, suddenly came under fire when the reality of a failed override came to light. These turnbacks mean departments have gone without for several years because they've been told to stop spending in order to keep money up into free cash for the next fiscal year. The town has been extremely frugal for a long time, and staffing overall is at a minimum. The truth of the matter is that many offices within the town and school department are dealing with limited functionality due to staff shortages. Our planning, inspections, conservation, engineering, to some degree health departments are not able to provide full service and/or full coverage, as most departments are with only one person per function or one-person departments. When many departments of one are out due to allowed vacation, professional development requirements, or illness, there was no one to take on the tasks or duties. The estimated combined lost time to citizens is over 286 workdays per year. This equates to delayed plans review, loss of citizen technical assistance, and citizen inconvenience causing multiple visits to the town hall. There are many areas within the Bourne School Department that face similar circumstances. There is no place to cut in order to show frugality anymore. Those days have concluded. The last rounds of reductions, due to the result of the failed override, coupled with reductions made just before the annual town meeting in 2015, have cut to the bone and beyond. Bourne public schools are funded at the minimum level, and some could justifiably make the argument below the minimum level. The municipal non-public safety departments cannot endure more personnel reductions. Any further reductions in the budget will have to include public safety. All town departments have again depicted a strong sense of fiscal restraint, as I stated earlier. These folks work hard every day to bring services to the citizens and that the elected leaders demand and the citizens also demand at the least possible cost. Our public safety and natural resource leaders continue to do outstanding work with tangible increased demand on their staffing and expertise. The participation in programs offered at the library, recreation department, and council on aging is increasing. However, fees are replacing what were formerly town-funded expenses. Adjustments have been made and will be brought forward at a couple upcoming special town meeting in February to keep the council on aging bus driver, stave off loss of accreditation, and keep the CLAMS network current at the library for the FY17 budget. Citizens use these services, and they are as important to large constituencies as our schools and public safety departments are to all. The town public work and landfills divisions continue to provide excellent service while transitioning to a new way of conducting business. The facilities department is saving the town money on a daily basis and is trying to keep the long neglected brick and mortar piece of the organization in shape. Additional demands of the state and national government mandates are increasing, and our ability to respond remains stagnant. There are good things happening again. We are beginning to think forward as a municipal in a fiscal and management sense. We have begun the system of priority-based budgeting. While a bit delayed due to the work leading up to the override vote and the travails to cut the budget after the failure thereof, initial meetings have been conducted and departments have worked on the first phases of the program. The DPW complex has been completed, and that is something the entire town should take pride in accomplishing. An open house will be scheduled in the spring. The school and police facility building committees are up and running. Communication between the town administration and school department and the elected chairs of the Board of Selectmen and school committee are better than they have been for years. It helps all of us when frank and clear discussions about departmental needs are frequent and candid. The ISWIM Futures Working Group continues to work with the town's hired and elected leadership to move many projects and ideas forward to assure a long life at the landfill site. The Financial Project Working Group, as appointed by the administrator, has served much of the purpose it was charged with, and a different iteration of a similar group is being formulated. The town has a more advanced set of financial policies as a result of this collaborative process. Now for the budget. That was a long intro, but now for the budget. The town is no longer in a position to continue most operations in a similar manner for the upcoming year. We had planned to have slides, but they're in your report. We'll show each area of town government and the proposed increase. Note, this assumes that recommended amendments to the FY16 budget, as we described above, and to the Board of Selectmen that we discussed on January 12th, 2016 are included. Any additional changes to the FY16 budget beyond these few modifications will alter the numbers below. At the end of this, you will see that continuing on, even after all the FY16 and FY17 reductions, will leave us seriously upside down in FY18. That will be in your long-term plan. This budget also takes into consideration of the requirements of the selectmen. There are no new positions requiring additional funding. Stating departments are up or down in this current climate is not really a factual way to comment on the budget. Function is level or reduced from the point of the failed override and reductions required from that. Adjustments have had to be made where some reductions were too severe or there was unanticipated fallout. I think it best now to look to where we have come from and where we appear to be going. If you turn to the page, you will see the FY16, FY17 budget, and you'll notice a couple of things. The budget is up about 2.5 million, plus or minus. And most of the budgets, if you look down, are at 2.5%, like the school department, or the Upper Cape Regional or Public Safety. Administrative services are up 1.08%. DPW is up 3.98%, but much of that is because we are proposing to increase the amount in the snow and ice accounts, which has been underfunded for years. And then if you look toward the bottom, under the debt service costs, you will see that debt service is up approximately $1.02 million as a result of the $14 million bond that the town selectmen voted recently, and that includes most of the DPW facility. But overall, if you look at your departmental budgets, your human services is down 6%, your culture and rec is down 7%, schools are only up 2.5%. So it's fairly, the operational piece of this budget is very frugal. The town will hold approximately 11%, which is at policy, of the proposed 2017 budget in savings after the use of approximately $1 million in free cash for budget offsets, which is in adherence with the new policy. I further recommend that an absolute minimum of cash be used to fund the capital improvements budget. The budget presented will continue the swim lesson program on a fee-for-service basis, and as was clearly stated in the municipal public forums leading up to the override this past October, in this proposed budget, lifeguards at 2 beaches are proposed to be eliminated once again. I again note, and we discussed this last week, that the Recreation Department, as an example, has no budgetary expense line items. They were eliminated when the override failed. All programs are fee-based The town's most recent borrowing on bonded debt was net less than 2%. We must take advantage of these continual but limited low interest rates. A new police facility must be the priority in consort with a new elementary school project. Both must be accomplished, and town leaders must work together to achieve success for these two important facilities. Notwithstanding the above changes, the budget meets the requirements of the townspeople as a result of the failed override. As I just stated, we expect to use approximately $1 million for the FY17 budget in free cash as an offset. The stabilization account currently holds $3.5 million, and the capital stabilization account approximately $260,000. If you go to your next 2 pages, you will see what we provide you every year, which is a history of our free cash. And the next page is a history of our stabilization. Note the stabilization account is up only slightly, and that is due to interest. There has been no contribution to the stabilization account in the last 12 months. We are at the new policy of 6% as opposed to 7%. The budget as presented will continue to protect the town's AA+ bond rating, which provides us better interest on borrowing. You know, and for the record, I guess, I've said this every year, but I'm gonna say it again this year. Most departments, not all departments, but most departments remain understaffed while the complexities of running this organization continue to grow. This is a $60 million corporation. We must, as a community, address the most critical staffing needs as depicted earlier in this document. That means the schools, that means some of our non-public safety departments, that certainly means our second floor. Our second floor, where all the departments of one are. There's no community development, there's no economic development officer. There's certainly community and economic development happening. The inspections departments are one, the conservation department is one, the school department has administrative staff of one in the superintendent's office, and I know how hard that is. I know that other things like that are occurring in the school department. I'm just not in the schools on a daily basis, but I certainly know that they are feeling the crunch. Override recommendations, I said it earlier, but I want to be sure it's understood. An override is necessary for FY18, and preferably before. It's up to the selectmen to determine the timing of such. The town, in my opinion, cannot endure another $1.3 to $1.8 million in reductions. The enterprise funds, the recommended ISWIM budget represents a continuation of significant change of how the department will be successful moving forward. The long-term contract with Covanta that is really assuring stability is helping us be able to plan for the future. The current Landfill Futures Working Group has done an exceptional job in scoping future endeavors and is to be commended. Implementing single-stream recycling and the potential purchase of land south of the existing facility will further enhance the stability and long-term viability of the department. The sewer department continues to function with minimal labor and equipment costs. Costs associated with this budget are largely a function of costs assessed by the town of Wareham for materials used in the treatment process at the plant. Note, as I said last year, underground infrastructure and associated pumping stations are old and need ongoing commitment. As I also noted last year, obtaining timely information from Wareham has been challenging. The Board of Sewer Commissioners are concerned with that and working on that with consultancy and staff. Budgetary highlights, this is kind of the same as you see every year. There are a couple of changes here I want to talk about. You know that the ambulance fees will be adjusted to depending on the rates that the feds and the state set, but we are proposing the use of this funding source to assist with offsetting some of the budgetary and capital items directly related to the Emergency Medical Services Division of the Fire Department. The debt service, all the other things are about the same, although we have estimated new growth in at $400,000. There's a substantial increase in the exempt and non-exempt debt this year, as I stated earlier. And we are within the levy limit under 2.5, and if you turn to the next page, I think it's your next page, you will see the levy limit. It's my intention to continue to work with the school and other department leaders in an effort to achieve municipal efficiencies while holding to the current budgetary numbers, including adjustments made upward or downward as the Commonwealth's budget picture becomes clearer. I also note that discussion regarding the state budget generally encompasses state aid, but we also must be cognizant of state assessments. And if you look to your next page, I won't go through them, but you will see what has happened with our aid. Our general state aid with Chapter 70 is up about $500,000 in the last 4 years, and our assessments are up about $900,000. So that's that brings us upside down by about $400,000. You know that it's a challenge as the numbers are going to go up and down over the next several months. I know that the selectmen have some ideas for the budget, and I look forward to working with the board on this. I want to note for the record, I've said it a couple of times, but we have the best municipal departmental staff in the Commonwealth. We have some of the most dedicated department leaders and administrative support staff, I think, of any community around. You come to this town for the most part, you talk to the developers, you talk to business people, you talk to citizens that deal with more than one town. And we are 90% of the time told that the folks in town hall and the folks that work at the DPW and the folks at the school department are the most accommodating to the citizenry of many of the towns in the area. And we should be proud of that. I know I am. So in closing, I just want to note that the department heads and employees have been instrumental endeavoring to make this budget work. The chairs of the school committee and board of selectmen and the school superintendent are thanked for the high level of cooperation over the past several months, especially over the past few weeks as we try to put this together. And finally, I want to recognize the Director of Finance for her continued support, expertise, and guidance, and good humor, especially this most difficult year that she's been through. Her unyielding commitment and highest level of professionalism to this town is unwavering. I thank you for your attention. It was much shorter than last year, whether you believe it or not, and I look forward to working on the budget with you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Any questions for the town administrator?
Questions or comments?
Questions or comments? We have a whole opportunity to get into the specifics.
Be nice now.
I mean, I'll be glad to start.
You want to, why don't we start with an overview, because I think we need to get into the meat of the matter within the special town meeting. And we've also left the discussion open for some budget discussions later on in the agenda, but.
No, I just want to say that in the last 2 weeks, I have met with 3 department heads of some of the larger departments. Mr. Ellis and I have fire and police, and I have ice swim. And I think the common theme is that there is, the next place to cut is staff. No one, I mean, when you're at a point where a department, say Public Works, may have a line item for repair of a machinery at $100,000, and I'm just making that up, and say in 16 they only use 50,000 of that, the administrator goes in and says, well, we can cut that 100 down to 50. And we might need the 100 the following year, but there's just no place to cut other than staff at this point, as far as I can see. It's unfortunate. You know, I talk about trying to be more efficient in some areas. I just, it's coming down to staff.
I don't think you and I have any disagreement
Yeah.
in that at all,
No.
Mr. Picard.
So, that was just that's the big thing I took out of it. I think we all have comments on, in fact, I made them recently, that I think, you know, that should be and we addressed this in the last meeting, it should be the department head's request, the town administrator's recommendation, and then the Board of Selectmen's action.
And I think you have that.
And we
in
have
the
that,
slide,
yeah.
yes.
So that's, I think that's good, because that way, we know what the departments feel they need, and albeit they probably can't get it, but it would be nice if they could. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, Mr. Picard. Mr. Blanton and Mr. Ellis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'll piggyback on my colleague, Mr. Picard's comments there. When Mr. Meyer and I met with several of the department chairs, the committees that we represent, we heard several very similar themes, that there not only is staff the only place left to cut, but in many of these departments, some of these folks are the only person in that department. If you cut any staff in the department, you're effectively cutting the department. You're going to lose services in those departments that are already understaffed. We spoke with the library director, and we were told that the lack of staff, the dearth of staff that they have, they're able to tread water at this point. But we also agreed that treading water is probably not a sustainable strategy moving forward. We also looked at what can they continue and maintain with the short staff, and what opportunities get lost by short staffing and just treading water. The ability to look at anything innovative, anything creative, anything that might create new revenues, new programs, community enhancements, those opportunities just, quite frankly, get lost. And I don't think the library director's alone in that summation. Most of the other department heads seem to reiterate the same theme, that if all we have is just barely able to tread water, then they lose all of that opportunity to look at all of the things that make our community innovative, creative, successful, and increase and enhance quality of life opportunities. It quite frankly, you know, we talked about the allusion to the idea of really treading water, and that it's really an unsustainable practice. At some point in time, that loss of innovation, that loss of the ability to do things differently, to enhance services, is going to end up probably result in less services, less attractive community, less quality of life, fewer services, and eventually those things will impact property values, desire to be in this community. If property values decline, we're going to see town coffers decline, necessitating an increase in taxes, which is exactly the opposite of what most people in town want. But it's a self-fulfilling negative prophecy. So I hope we can come together and find some ways to try to correct some of these areas where we've lost.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Ellis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had an exhaustive discussion with DPW today. It went on for a great long time, and it comes down to the same thing that Mr. Picard said. If George is going to lose, it's got to be in personnel. He's got people piggybacking on different departments. While I was there, he was innovative in dealing with the project, and I think this is consistent. He has an exceptional work crew. He has a very good relationship with them, and we're very fortunate that George is in charge doing what he's doing, and we're very fortunate with a group of people that work for the DPW. They're to be congratulated, and I think it's like every other department in the town. Everybody's putting forth their best. So consequently, it comes down, unfortunately, to if there are any more further cuts that are going to happen, it's gonna have to be in personnel. And you got a brand-new building there, and you can't let that brand-new building go to rot. You have to maintain it. There's things that have to be done, and so consequently, I was extremely satisfied with the dialogue I had today. There were a number of suggestions made, and George is very amenable to dealing with things like that. And so I just wanted to say, Mr. Chairman, that I look forward to dealing in the future, but I think that the DPW is in good hands. We're very lucky as a town to have it as we are going forward with the innovative things that are being done now with everything else that's on board.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meyer?
this budget that's being presented is a budget of reality. It's not a reality that I like. We're doing more with less, and personally, I think this budget needs adjustments. But that's may happen over the next few months. It may or may not. It's these department heads did the best job they could with the instruction that was given from the town administrator. I commend them for their work, but I respectfully disagree with what some of this is being submitted. Because ultimately what this budget presents to some degree is the two most vulnerable people in the community, the children and the elderly, are going to be affected the most. And as much as people say, oh, we condense from 5 down to 3 days, 95% of the programs are still going to be going on, but at what quality is my question. During the course of the next few months, we'll have multiple discussions on this, so I don't want to belabor something that's going to take some time, but hopefully the budget that goes to town meeting in May will be one that's, I think, in the best interest of the townspeople, that we can put forward based on the money that we can spend. So, but like I said, this is the first draft. I respect it, but I don't agree with it.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. I'd like to go right ahead, unless, is there anybody in the audience who wants to comment? We've had an opportunity to hear the budget message from the town administrator and several comments from the board. I would like to thank the board publicly for all the effort and extra time that you all have put into reviewing and going through the budgets in the last several weeks. I was very earnest to try to make sure we tried to follow to what both the charter and the town bylaws asked for. I hope we can deliver a budget to our friends on the Finance Committee on time this year with our recommendations and so forth. Okay. Why don't we go right ahead to the next item on the agenda then? That would be the review of the articles for the special town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I have new ones. We found a typo in, actually MJ found a typo. We fixed that, so I would like to hand to you the dated.
The 8 o'clock version of the...
Well, it was actually the 4:30.
So these are no good.
Right,
Good for
throw away.
notes.
A couple of things occurred in this, based on some discussions on the trip home on Friday.
Thank you.
With folks, although I've had some emails from the moderator relative to that over the past several hours as well. We have changed the wording on Article 11 to stop, halt the encompassing or trying to limit the article, which was what we were trying to do, to frame the article so that we weren't going to have a wide open budget amendment article. But we have now changed it based on the discussion with folks to simply state a sum of money, which will allow for debate here this evening as we try to put this warrant together.
Let's start with Article 1. And I see the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee is here. Barry, do you want to come up and just kind of go through these first couple of articles on the CPA fund proposals? Good evening and welcome. Nice to see you again. Did you get your stamp fixed?
Barry, did
Get
you
your
get your
stamp
stamp fixed?
No,
No, sorry to hear that.
what he's referring to, our date and time stamp, decided now to go southeast. So now we're doing it hand. That's what's happened to our department. So, but anyway,
Based on the forecast, we should all be going south.
thank you. Okay, CPA, as that's where the first
Absolutely.
article.
Please, the first article, I'll read it just for the sake of those folks. To see if the town will vote upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee to appropriate, borrow, or transfer from available funds a sum of money for engineering services, the reconstruction and resurfacing of an existing outdoor track at Jackson Field located behind Peebles Elementary School, including incidental costs related thereto. Said funds are to be expended under the direction of the Director of Business Services of the Bourne School Department and the Community Preservation Committee, or take any action thereon. I turn it over to you, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This particular project has been on the Community Preservation's radar for quite a while. And before I actually get into it, Mr. Chairman, if I might, just for the record, state that all of these funds that are being recommended at this town meeting or in any town meeting that involves community preservation articles, the funds are derived from the 3% surcharge on everybody's real estate tax bill. It in no way impacts on the operational funds of the community, as well as a matching fund supposedly from the state. So this is where all of this funding is going to be coming from. So this project had been proposed by the director of the school business department. I understand it has also been endorsed by the school department, the school administration, school facilities committee, et cetera, as well as the recreation committee came before us. The long and the short of it is that the current track, I believe, has been installed over 20 years ago, plus behind the middle school. It is in total disrepair, and actually, it's probably, and I'll use the word, close to being unsafe for use at this point. The presentation was made to us, and the reason we are including this article as well as the next one coming up to spend funds is that we want to meet this spring's construction schedule. And that's the reason that we're putting it forth and asking that it be included in the warrant for the February 8th town meeting. The estimated total project budget is $675,000, of which those funds, it is anticipated, and the committee is going to be recommending that we borrow for that particular sum of money over a period of years. Excuse me, under Chapter 44, Section 7, subsection 25 of the Mass General Laws, we are allowed as a community to go ahead and to borrow for recreational outside activities of this particular nature. So in the motion, that will be the reference to the statute. So the committee has listened to the proposal, and we have voted unanimously to recommend this to the town meeting membership on February 8th.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ellison and Mr. Picard.
thank you. I would highly endorse this article. I have occasion to go down there to try and keep myself young, and this track is in serious need of upkeep and care. I've spoken to a number of premium runners that use this track now, and it's an absolute wonder that we haven't had someone break an ankle down there. And to put our young people from the high school in a competitive field on this track, whether it's a 100-yard dash or the mile, it's just ludicrous. And I think that this is one of the things that we can do with the funds available under CPA, where it's not taken out of the budget as such that we're working on. It's money well spent. It'll be used by a whole host of people, not only the children of the school, but a lot of us that are trying to get back in shape. And I highly endorse this.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Mr. Picard and then Mr. Meyer.
Reference to the borrowing, Barry, as I understand it, Community Preservation Act will either have to be revoted in 2020?
No, it can either be, it can be revoked, it can be left alone, et cetera. It can be reviewed at the end of 2020. The reason for 2020 was when we converted from the Cape Cod Land Bank, and the town overwhelmingly voted to go into community preservation, which allows us to do recreation, open space, community housing, and historic preservation restoration, et cetera. But if the borrowing, is my understanding, and I've double-checked this, that in fact, what would happen is if the town voted to discontinue the CPA program
Right.
at the end of fiscal year 2020, the bond indebtedness carries forward
To the town.
to the, no,
Right.
and to be paid off through the surcharge still on everybody's real estate tax bill. So for instance, the finance director, Linda, will give us a debt schedule through bond council, et cetera. And if it takes, say, 1.0% or whatever versus the 3% surcharge just to pay off the debt service, then that would be the set surcharge until all of the debt is paid off. Currently, most of the debt is for, all of our debt is for land purchases, as well as the creation of the fields behind the middle school. And the latest one we have out is till 2025.
Well, I can imagine with tax bills going up, and that's what people look at, is the bottom right-hand corner, how much they have to pay. If, right now, everybody in town with a tax bill is paying 3% towards this. If someone wanted some relief from the 3%, they may decide to bring forward an action to, in some manner, dismantle the Community Preservation Fund. So I'm wondering how many years that you perceive borrowing for these articles. Would it be at 10 or 20 or?
We haven't quite determined that as of yet.
Okay.
We're gonna do this in conjunction with yourselves, Tom, and the administrator. Under the statute in this particular article, we are allowed to go up to 15 years.
Oh, okay, well,
That's the outside debt service.
okay.
Under,
thank you.
again, chapter 44.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Myra?
Yes, through the chairman and to the superintendent, I support this article 100%. I mean, it's long overdue. What I'm hoping is, or maybe you know, if it will just be long of a long-term plan to do the park over in its entirety. I mean, I see people sitting up in the stands at those football games, and some of them take their lives into their own hand, getting splinters and stuff. And so I'm wondering, as part of the next phase going forward in future years, would you be consider other improvements to Jackson Field? And would it come out of CPA?
We just preliminary touched on that, Peter, if I might.
Sure.
This particular project, and the track, we have a layout, we have the budget, we have everything. And the actual fencing around will actually abut the existing bleachers. It will be a little bit of a walkway there. If we are, I understand, if we're gonna go onto that line, and we do go through additional projects, that, in fact, that would require a whole another set of layouts, a whole nother set of permitting, a whole nother set of requirements to meet in order to expand either the bleachers or whatever other configuration we need to do down there. But the track itself will be fenced in entirely, and it'll abut directly the current set of bleachers. So it's our plan as a community preservation committee to do exactly what you're saying, is to meet with the school department, school superintendent, the athletic director, et cetera, and this really came forward because this has been in the master plan for the recreation portion, not only school department, but for the town as a whole. So it's come forth from many sources, and so this time is the proper time to put it forward.
Mr. Chairman,
It's a joint effort.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve Article number 1 positively.
Second.
Okay, and I'm assuming that that's for the $675,000 as presented, and the terms would be borrowing.
Yes.
Okay, and a second? Okay. Any further discussion? I got a motion that's been made and seconded for Article 1 to approve $675,000 for the purposes of Article 1, and the means would be to borrow. Mr. Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also in favor of this project. I remember when the field had been resurfaced back when I used to pole vault on it, but that was about 30 years ago, so I know it's run down since that time. I'm curious what the material is that's going to be used in the construction of the resurfacing, and what's the life expectancy of it?
The gentleman brought us a sample of it. I'll have to bring it to the meeting, but I do have pictures of the condition of the track, of all of as well as the budget preparation, that type of thing. I think the expectancy is probably for about another 25 years.
Great.
and expects probably the maintenance on it would not have to require between 8 to 10 years once it's installed, like another resurfacing only. Because it's in such a disrepair currently, that's why we have to do a lot more work than we anticipated.
So Mr. Ellis will get 10 more years out of it?
I believe he will.
I need it.
Thank you. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Mr. Greeno had his hand up.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of supporting Article 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion, those opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Why don't we go right to Article 2, Barry, as town clerk?
Right, wearing that hat, what I've asked and filed the article is to ask the town to accept Mass General Laws, Chapter 54, Section 16A, that allows the town clerk to appoint the warden, clerk, or inspectors in circumstances where any of these persons are not present at the opening of the polls in accordance with the requirements of the statutory section. The background on this is very simple. Under Chapter 54, Section 12, the Board of Selectmen annually appoint all of the election workers, from the wardens to clerks, and we call them checkers, or inspectors, pursuant to that Mass General Law. Under this section, and it has happened, but very, very rarely, that at 7 o'clock or 6:30 in the morning, I get a call that says, I'm sick, I can't show up, and what do I do? And luckily, so far, you people have been very generous with your time. Tom's been very generous with his time, and we've been able to scurry around, get a fast appointment, and then I have to open the polls at 7 no matter what happens, because the ballots will go in the side pocket, but et cetera. So under this statute, and because of the heavy election season, as you know, we're coming into, with primaries and the presidential election coming up in November, at least by the acceptance of this statute, if that circumstance arises, the clerk is able to appoint an additional poll worker right then to step in.
Mr. Chairman, it seems like a good business practice. I would move approval of Article 2 based on the presentation of the town clerk.
I have a motion's been made by Mr. Picard and a second by Mr. Blanton. Are there any questions? I just have one, Barry. Do we have to accept this each year, or is this one time and we're done?
No, one time we're done.
Okay. Any other questions relative to Article 2 of the special town meeting? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously for approval. Do you want to speak to Article 3, Barry? That's open space.
Right, this is a sponsor, and I'm wearing the hat now of the chairman of the Open Space Committee. We have talked about this for a while, and by background, if you recall, a couple of years ago, that with your support and everyone else, Tom, et cetera, the Open Space Committee, along with the CPC Committee, was able to purchase what we commonly refer to as the Lions property, which directly abuts the Atuxet Trading Post, and it has frontage on the Canal Service Road. The proposal under this article is to see if the town would vote to accept from the Bourne Historical Society, Inc., an easement on terms and conditions that you folks, the selectmen, deem to be in the best interest of the town, that will allow us to be able to construct a walkway approximately 30 feet wide from the Atuxet Post property, starting approximately at the back of the boat, where it is in that general area, towards the canal side, and that'll be able to take it up on a little slope right into the Lions property, which the town owns. That way we have a bit of a campus effect, and also it is our hope that in the future, what we'd like to do is to put like a small gazebo, et cetera, for the scenic vistas of the canal, like we have at the 3 Mile Overlook, and like we have down here on the canal pathways, crossways on Main Street. So the society is very willing. We approached them, and it actually was a mutual agreement to try and do this, which was a part of the overall plan between the two properties. And so in order to accomplish this, the first step is to ask the town to accept the easement. And then in the Maytown meeting, in the overall CPA article, I'm sure there will be some funding requested to put in the walkway. We envision it to be ADA compliant, of course, and probably with the same material that you see down here on Buzzards Bay. We're not anticipating asphalt. It would be, the same crushed stone or whatever. So we just think it's a great idea to try and marry the two campuses.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Picard and then Mr. Ellis.
No, I was going
I'll wait. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ellis.
In anticipation of this, I went down and inspected this on site, and I was able to speak to Mr. Barlow, chairman of the Historic Society, and the superintendent of the grounds down there, and went over it with them. And it's an unfortunate thing that we have a new person who's in charge of the Cape Cod Canal, running real estate, et cetera. And the Lions property had a stepway that went out to the service road probably for 70, 80 years that had never been encumbered, was right to pass and repass, small way for the property there. Now the Corps has taken it upon itself that they are trying to restrict a lot of their ways to the canal, and they have a team that's out looking on a daily basis where they can cut down on access points. This necessitated this article to come forward. The Board of Historic Society is in full support of this, and I would agree that this is the way to go. The Lions property is, we were very fortunate to get that, and this will add to the Aptuxet Trading Post area, and I think it's in the best interest, and all of you should visit there when the weather's great. It's really super. And it's unfortunate that the Corps has taken this attitude, and this is a way to remedy that. And I would hope that the board would vote for it.
Thank you, Jerry. Mr. Picard?
I was just gonna make a motion to approve Article 3.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And I think Article 4, is that correct?
Is that the War Memorial?
It is.
Okay.
I know you brought reinforcements.
Okay to go forward?
Sure, and I think Mr. Sala might want to speak to this as well. I think Mr. Sala might want to speak to this as well.
Sure.
I know Jonathan is here as well.
Okay, this project was put forth, well, let me back up a minute. This project was put forth a few years ago and requested the CPA follow-up to try and restore this project. We appropriated a sum of money, and actually Mr. Ellis and I think former Selectman DuPont were very active in trying to restore the War Memorial that is directly located in front of Town Hall. Some of you may not know what that is, but actually it's the monument that lists the names of the individuals from Bourne who served in the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. It has actually had gone into some disrepair, and hopefully it would be restored. Unfortunately, through the efforts of Selectman Ellis and DuPont, the person or the persons we hoped were going to do the project were unable to fulfill that requirement for various and sundry reasons, and therefore the monies were returned to the Community Preservation Fund. Since that time, Mr. Richard Conron has come forward and has actually been the lead person who has suggested that we once again take up this project. So he actually has gone ahead and has done an awful lot of the homework and the legwork towards this project. We have had tremendous assistance from John Nelson, our facilities director, George Saller, our DPW director, and Selectman Ellis has been involved at our request because of his past involvement in history of the town, et cetera, that is well known. So we have a budget of $350,000. It is well outlined, and it is well, we understand what it's going to be. The stone restoration and replacement, bronze relettering, the landscaping and replacement of the pavers, et cetera. Mr. Conron has gone out and has garnered a couple of proposals for us to review, but obviously this is a construction project and will be going out to public bid. It is our anticipation that these funds will come from the undesignated fund balance of the Community Preservation Fund. The funds are available, and we would again like to have this hopefully will be approved at the town meeting, because again we're trying to meet the spring construction schedule. This is a project that is well overdue and should be done. I think if anybody goes on the town website, the very first picture what shows in the town, there is the monument, there's the town hall. I believe it was constructed at the same time the town hall was in 1914,
and it is something that the town of Bourne is proud of, and we should preserve and restore. The Community Preservation Committee has voted again unanimously to recommend this project.
Thank you, Barry. Would Jonathan or George, would you like to add anything?
Thanks, Barry.
Good evening, George. Welcome.
Good evening. As the chairman of the Veterans Memorial Trustees, we supported this with our committee. It's also, we're in charge of the Veterans Memorials. This is a Veterans Memorial. So as far as the trustees, we had a unanimous vote on the Board of Trustees to support this, and we are a co-sponsor to this article.
Thank you, Judge. Any questions by any members of the board? Jerry?
I'd like to give a pat in the back to Mr. Conron. He's picked this up and done an excellent job going forward with this. I was unable to, in my tenure, to get it done due to extenuating circumstances, which I won't go into right now. But he's to be credited with doing this. He's gone through and done an excellent job, and I would hope that everybody would support this and Mr. Conron in this endeavor to represent the town of Bourne in honoring these veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Any other comments by any other member of the board?
Motion to approve Article 4.
Second.
I have a motion that's been made and seconded. I'm going to add that it's to transfer from the undesignated funds of the CPC of the amount of $350,000. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other questions or comments on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all.
On behalf of the Community Preservation Committee and everyone else, thank you very much. And
Thank you,
Tom-
Barry, for all
Tom,
of your
thank
time.
Thanks, Barry.
I wonder if Mr. was,
Mr. Farrell?
yeah, is he here?
He was here.
Yeah.
so I'm not-
Is there a member from the planning board that would like to speak to the articles relative to planning, Articles 5 and 6
Mr.
And
Farrell,
5, 6, and 7.
and 7?
I can speak briefly to Article 5. Article 6 is dealing with the signs. They're kind of, I don't know if they're easing up, but there's, for the downtown area relative to signs, there's been a lot of work on signs.
Well, let's start with Article 5.
Okay.
Mr. Farrell will wander back in.
Article 5 is really to change the height, is my understanding, in the B3 district on how tall buildings can be. The B3 district is primarily to the easterly side of the Bourne Rotary. It's really to change the height requirement. That's my understanding. We had at a meeting. Don, do you have something to add on that?
I was just going to say, with all due respect, I would prefer to have either Ms. Moore or somebody from the planning board here to explain these.
Yeah, I
if
think
I'm
it would
gonna
be
vote.
better myself. That's the only one that I have
I
any
would,
knowledge of.
I would suggest we
I-
put 5, 6, and 7 on our next meeting and ask that a professional staff member be
Just
here,
so,
or Mr.,
right.
somebody from planning board.
And
Because-
from the purpose of the charter, they have the right to put articles forward, so they
Oh,
don't have to.
I have no problem with that,
Yeah,
but I
but
just
they
want
should come in and explain, no
just
argument.
want to understand it before I vote on it.
All right.
I don't do that
Question,
often.
Mr. Ellis?
In relation to that, this was changed from a BT zone to on my watch when I was chairman of the planning board in the 70s. And the reason for it was that we had anticipated Metropolitan Life was going to build a huge building at that time. And unfortunately, that never came to fruition, and the zone that was set aside for that had never been changed until recently, when another entity has come forward and wants to go in here, and they need this change to facilitate the building that they want to put on there. It's in an area right now up near where the Panorama Motel was, in that general vicinity, and there's a paintball operation going there. And I would say that this would be in the real best interest of the town if this was changed. And it doesn't really have any effect on anyone except who's going to be able to develop that piece of property. And I do think that it'd be well worth supporting.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay, well, we're gonna ask for some professional explanation for both the board and the public. Why don't
We're
we
gonna be able to give a much better description on 7 and 8, certainly. On 6 and 7, excuse me.
Yeah. Let me ask, we go to Article 8, which is, deals with single-stream recycling, and I wonder if we might have Jonathan come up. Good evening, Jonathan, how are you?
Super, great. I appreciate the time to speak with you tonight.
Appreciate you being here.
I was told last time I went on too long, so I will be more than happy to answer any questions you may have about this article.
Why don't we give us a quick overview, because now we have an opportunity to speak to a little bit of a wider audience, so.
The article before you, we're requesting approximately $1.1 million for funds to be spent out of I-SWIM retained earnings to fund the single stream and semi-automation project that I brought before the Selectmen approximately 2 weeks ago. This project would provide needed carts for residents to put at the curbside, and for the DPW to come around and pick them up with an automated equipment or semi-automated equipment. The article asks for funding to purchase the carts, make some equipment updates, and also some advertising or some public outreach dollars to notify the residents of the changes to the program.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this-
Mr. Picard?
This is gonna come out of the enterprise retained earnings, or borrow, or do we know? I mean, do we decide here now, or?
Well, we can approve the article, or we can approve the article and identify this evening where it is coming from, but the proposal was from the retained earnings.
Or borrow,
It says or borrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let the town.
No, that's okay.
Oh, no,
It's all right.
I'll let the town administrator.
Well, capital outlay, has met on this, and the chair of the capital outlay committee.
Would you like to speak, Mary Jane? Thank you. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Mary Jane Mistrangelo from the Capital Outlay Committee. The Capital Outlay Committee actually met on this article 3 times and voted unanimously last week at our last meeting to recommend approval of the article. In our discussions, we did talk about this article being paid for out of retained earnings.
Okay.
And from the I-SWIM retained earnings. But we do support this article.
Thank you very much. Discussion, gentlemen?
I move approval.
Second.
And I guess we can announce at town meeting if it's gonna be retained earnings.
Right, you'll go through the motions, you'll have the motions
I'll
prior,
move,
so-
I'll move the approval of the article by the Board of Selectmen.
All right. And we're going to hold off on the identification of where the funds are coming from at this time.
Yeah, because I think retained earnings, as I understand it, we've got 7-point-something million, but we've got to have some of that for other things coming down the road in the next 2 or 3 years, correct?
Right, and we'll be adding to that as
Right,
each
right,
year
right.
too, so that was the
But
intent.
I think
of
if we can
being able
get
to
one of
spend out
these,
this.
either 8 or 9 out of retained earning, I think
Correct.
that's wise instead of borrowing.
All right. Well, why don't we do this, and I'll entertain a motion to approve the article, and then we can discuss and make a recommendation on the funding at the town meeting, if not before.
He made a motion, I second it.
Thank you. I've got a motion that's been made by Mr. Picard,
Thank you.
seconded by Mr. Meyer. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Are there any questions on the motion that's been made and seconded? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving Article 8 in the amount of $1.1 million, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And then Article 9.
That, Mr. Chairman, is if you'd like me to jump in, I don't see Mr. Barrett here, so. There are 12 acres of land to the immediate south of our existing landfill property. And we have the opportunity to purchase that parcel from the owner, and as a result, it will extend the life of our landfill. We will move our operations center, our recycling center, our offices down to that 12 acres, opening up the rest of the landfill for enough landfilling to take in a number of millions of dollars per year. It's something that I think was suggested way back by Mr. Barlow of the Board of Health at one time at one of their meetings, and we followed up on it. It's been quite a long time coming, but we've been able to put it together. So, and I believe we don't have an amount on that, or is that
The motion will have the amount,
Have
but
the
it's
amount, yeah.
approximately $1.8
8?
million.
Which is down from, yeah, and there's some other conditional issues relevant to, the existing landowner wanted to mine this parcel, but because they cannot, they will be compensated by some existing surplus soil that the town has, as well as some potential rights in the future.
Correct.
I have a question on the technical merits of Article 9. It says here, in the best interest of a town to raise and appropriate, transfer from available funds, or borrow a sum of money. I thought from my experience, raise and appropriate could only be done before the tax rate was set. Now the tax rate's been set.
You
back
are
in Oct-
correct. This was drafted by council, however.
Okay.
So, you are correct. So in the motion won't allow for a raise and appropriate, and being ISWIM, it wouldn't be a raise and appropriate. Anyways, you're right, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you.
So I'll move approval as presented.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion that's been made and seconded to approve Article 9 as presented without, at this time, specifically identifying the source of the funds. Mr. Blanton?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Yeah, I think maybe a question to Mr. Pickard. You spent the most time on this particular matter. Am I correct in recalling that the purchase of this land may allow us to effectively extend the life of the landfill out to about the year approximately 2039, is what I understand?
I'm not sure if it's 2039. It's well into the 2030s by a few years, maybe up to 2035, I would hope. Depends on what comes in at that point. If we still have an agreement with Covanta, which I presume we will, for their ash, which compacts at 1.6 times better than municipal solid waste, we should be able to stretch it out quite a bit and still accommodate our other clients like Falmouth. So, yeah, it's into the 2030s. We're going to move, probably, I missed this portion of it, but I think we're going to move Harvest Power to that location so that we have one big landfill and everything, all the office, mechanical, Harvest Power, and our recycling center on this 12 acres. So, and some landfilling of municipal solid waste.
Consolidate our landfill campus, if you will.
Right. That's a good term for it, the campus of Iceland.
I'll take credit for that later on.
All right.
Okay, other questions? I did have a motion that's made and seconded. Is that correct?
Question.
Yes, please. If you wouldn't mind, just for,
My name is Brian LeMay. The question I have, we just finished talking about the budget. We're up to our ears in salary funds. We're almost ready to cut salaries if we have to. How are we gonna fund clearing this land and grading it and everything else? I don't think we could afford another contractor.
I believe the same way we did clearing the land, doing the site work for our public works facility, our ISWIM crew and our public works crew, they have some very talented operators up there who can get the work done, and probably have it done in no time at all.
You think they can do it within their departmental budgets?
Yeah, I believe they can. They did, as I said, they did within the public works garage for site work.
Or was that part of the capital budget?
Jonathan, was that part of the capital budget for that, or was it an in-kind donation of labor, perhaps, or?
The way it worked out, it was an in-kind donation of labor, and the two departments contributed approximately $375,000 for probably what was a $1.5 million job, was the total cost of all that labor, machine, equipment, and everything.
Right. And if you look at the grand scheme of things,
I'm
sure.
just worried
Thank you,
about
Brian.
putting more strain on our budget.
So we are, so are all of us, I think,
Okay,
so, thank you.
other questions relative to Article 9? I believe I have a motion and a second for the amount of $1.8 million for the purposes of Article 9 with an unspecified source at this time.
Right.
It'll either be borrowing or from retained earnings from ISWIM. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of approving Article 9 for the special town meeting for $1.8 million, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Article 10, to see if the town will vote to appropriate transfer from available funds or borrow a sum of money for the purpose of funding of a capital improvement project, which is a replacement of an ambulance in the amount of $260,000. Who is going to speak? Mary Jane? Thank you.
The Capital Outlay Committee met with the fire chief on last Wednesday for his FY17 capital plan. And one of the items on the FY17 capital plan was the replacement of the ambulance A136. And he wanted to do that before July 1st of this year because there are new regulations that are going in for July 1st for ambulances that will increase the cost of an ambulance by $50,000, approximately $40,000 to $50,000. And our ambulances have been on about an 8-year replacement cycle. We are currently waiting for the replacement of ambulance A135 that was approved by the town meeting last year. And that ambulance is the exact same kind of ambulance as that we're talking about this ambulance for replacement. The one that's currently being replaced is a 2007 E450 Ford. When we went to replace it last year, it had 134,000 miles on it. The ambulance we're talking about replacing, which the Capital Outlay Committee recommended replacing at this special town meeting rather than waiting to the annual town meeting. And the reason that we did that is that it takes 8 to 12 months to get an ambulance replaced. This ambulance that we're talking about replacing has 131,000 miles on it as of November. The cost of repairs that have been put into the current ambulance that we're talking about moving up, we have already put $12,600 of repairs into this ambulance, 246 man-hours of repair by the DPW. It has.
Sorry, is that for this particular ambulance we're
For
looking at?
this ambulance
Okay,
that we're
thank you.
talking about
Yep.
replacing.
Thanks, Mary Jane.
The powertrain has difficulties. The fuel injectors have had to be replaced several times. It is constantly having to be repaired. The problem with these ambulances is they're very labor intensive to repair. They're this van type ambulance where they have to pull up the front and pull out all kinds of things. And so it's very labor intensive to repair. The one that we replaced last year, and this was Edwin Rivera actually came to the Capital Outlay Committee to talk about this. The one that we still have that we're waiting for it to be replaced because we're in this 8 months, to 12-month waiting, we've put $28,081 and 546 man-hours into the repairs of the one that we're waiting for the replacement. So when the Capital Outlay Committee looked at it, we said, we know we want to move this up we want to replace this ambulance before July 1st in order to get under the current regulations for a gross vehicle weight. But we felt that with the extensive repairs that they're experiencing with these ambulances and the potential that we would have to put another $15,000 or $16,000 into repairs in this ambulance if we waited till the annual town meeting, the Capital Outlay Committee said, we know we need to replace this. We know we want to do it this year. We feel that it would make the most prudent sense to replace it at this special town meeting so we avoid unnecessary expenses and repairs to an ambulance that has already needed a lot of repairs. So that was the unusual request of why we put it on normally we would have waited, and it came on initially as a request for the annual town meeting, but because we hadn't finalized the warrant yet, we thought we might take this opportunity to actually move it forward a little, because it is gonna take 8 to 10 months to get it replaced anyway.
Did you also make a recommendation on the funding? Was it from,
I believe the town administrator said the ambulance fund.
That's my recommendation, yes.
questions? Mr. Picard and Mr. Meyer?
So this is to replace ambulance 136, which was scheduled for replacement at our annual town meeting in
It was,
2017,
yes,
or a special within the annual, I presume. That would probably make sense simply because we need to have it ordered by June 30th. And if we did it within special, instead of within the annual, we could make sure that that is ordered and that our obligations to any type of regulatory issues are addressed. We have ambulance 135 coming in.
which is on order, correct?
It's on order. When is that due? Do we have any idea?
March?
Yeah, I mean, it's
See,
8 to 12 months, so
see,
it is the ordering delay. I think, I mean, I know that, normally we would say we would want to do this on the normal annual town meeting schedule. I just think in this particular case, that the Capital Outlay Committee is getting very concerned about putting good money after bad. We know that this ambulance is going to has required, we've already put 246 man-hours in repairing this ambulance. There's a potential of another 300 man-hours if it acts the exact same ambulance that we've had with as many miles as we have. We know what happens with these ambulances when they reach this. So it was really our recommendation that we move it forward, because we know even if we pass it at this annual town meeting and order it, it's gonna be 8 to 10 months before we get it.
I wish I had a business where it would take 8 or 10 months to
Right.
make something.
Right, well, and so we currently have, if I could go back to my initial questions, and we have ambulance 135, which is still in service
Yes.
and is awaiting a
Yes,
replacement in March.
right.
And is ambulance 135 relatively serviceable? I presume it's still in service, still operating on a daily basis.
Over the life of the vehicle, yes, it's in service.
Okay, that was,
That to answer your quick
okay,
question.
thank you. I'm just sticking with quick questions. I've told you I'm opposed to this. I will say I'm opposed to this because frankly, as Mr. LeMay's question on where the money's coming from to purchase this property, although it's coming out of the landfill and it's gonna do something, I just can't see why we can't wait till the special town meeting within the annual town meeting in May, 4 months away, whatever. I get that we're throwing good money after bad. Hopefully it won't work. Maybe they schedule some sort of a thing to hold on to 135 unless they're trading it. I doubt they'll trade it, right? It's probably not being traded.
It becomes the spare.
It becomes the spare.
No,
Okay, well,
they're both going.
there's
They're both going. Both of these ambulances are going. These ambulances are constantly requiring repair.
I am,
So you're having 2 or 3 times a week when you actually, you have no backup ambulance.
okay. Well, that's.
Our 4th ambulance is our backup.
I guess
so.
we have mutual aid with Wareham, Falmouth, or Plymouth, or Sandwich, which would make sense to me. I'm opposed to it. I will jump in on Mr. LeMay's thought that it's just, we're in tough financial times. And the other thing beyond that, there's been a lot of talk. The override failed, people are up in arms, people are upset at the fact that, well, they're finding ways to do this now. I believe it's prudent for us to remain as vigilant as possible and not replace this ambulance until the special town meeting within the annual. We can't just say, we got another 260,000. We had the same thing happen. There was a lack of trust, let me say, among some elected officials on another committee, that when we got money to do things, all of a sudden we just did it off from the town side. And I can't blame the folks. We either have a financial problem and we're gonna stick to our guns, or we're gonna continue to try to spend our way out of it. And I don't think this particular time is a good time to do that. So I'm sorry, I am respectfully opposing it. I was on capital outlay for a couple of years. I respect the good work that you folks do, but I just can't bring myself to vote in favor of this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, gentlemen? Mr. Ellis?
Yeah, I don't often agree with Don on a lot of things, but this one I happen to agree on. My concern is that we can't afford a bus driver for the Council on Aging, which we've had to borrow, steal, and grab funds for. And all of a sudden, we've got $260 going out for an ambulance. I think with what we've got for an ambulance is, where there's a will, there's a way, and I think it can go forward. So I would side with Don on this issue.
I would like to, if I may, make one
Please, Andrew.
comment.
Sure.
One of the things that we were discussing at the Capital Outlay Committee was some concerns, increased concerns that are happening at the Pecasset Fire Station. And what it prompted us to talk about is that in 2009, we had the Cecil report, which evaluated our buildings and talked about the importance of replacing buildings. And one of the high priorities of that report was the police station. And when we talked in 2009 about replacing the police station, the cost of replacing the police station was $7.9 million. When we talk about replacing the police station now, we're talking about $15 million. And so I understand that we have to be very frugal with our capital expenditures. My concern is when we use that frugality not to pay for things that we need to do and delay them until they're no longer $260,000 ambulance, but now they're a $350,000 ambulance, and we still are going to need to do it. So if we want to decide that we want to defer our capital plans, we can do that. But what happens when you do that is you start paying more money for repairs that you wouldn't have had to pay for. The cost of the equipment goes up, and then the infrastructure of the town deteriorates. So it's up to the Board of Selectmen, and it's up to town meeting whether they feel that it's important to replace this ambulance now. I think that the Capital Outlay Committee was trying to be really careful about the cost. This is the third large ambulance that we would be getting, which would mean we all have converted all of 3 of our 4 ambulances into the larger ambulances. The 4th ambulance, which is the smaller ambulance, which is the one that's kept at Pecasset, cannot be replaced. Currently, it's on replacement for fiscal year 19, but right now it cannot be replaced until we do something about the Pecasset Fire Station, because the larger ambulances will not fit in the Pecasset Fire Station. So we are facing a number of very difficult issues in this town. And I just caution that one of the problems that we had is the Commonwealth, after Proposition 2.5 came in, is that towns made those decisions to cut capital because it could be deferred. And some of the consequences of that we've been actually feeling in capital now because we've let some of our capital go.
Thank you, AJ.
Could I just respond to part of that, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly, Mr. Picard.
Having served on capital with you, I get it. I mean, if you look at 352 communities within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, there's probably every one of them neglects their infrastructure. I'm talking about their capital expense, as we have with our Pocasset Station, as we have very much with our police station and the Peebles School and everything else. I get that, and I know that, a police station that Yarmouth built 15 years ago was like $6 million, and it's now would probably cost $25 million. I get all of that. But when we're looking at an ambulance cost, it is not going to go from a $259,000, $260,000 up to a $350,000 ambulance if we don't order it if we wait and order it in May at our special town meeting within our town meeting, because even the one you've got to replace in 19 is listed at 275. You figured in a $15,000 increase, and I think that's probably reasonable. But I just cannot, in good conscience, vote in favor of bringing this forward to the public.
Okay. Mr. Guarino?
I would, not on the discussion, but I will note to the vice chairman that at the special or annual, the funding mechanism will still be recommended as the same. Okay, just similarly.
I get it,
We've
but
taken stuff out of waterways to fund things,
yeah,
we'll be doing
it's
this.
perception.
I understand
I
that.
think the people need to understand that we're tight, we got the message on the override, and we're tightening our belt.
Yes.
Mr. Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm inclined to concur with Mary Jane's rationale that deferred capital expenses do increase over time. She eloquently explained, probably better than I would, that this is the kind of can we kick down the road that generally does become more expensive as time goes on. So in terms of fiscal prudence and restraint in favor of our bosses, the citizenry of this town, it may be the more fiscally prudent strategy to purchase a piece of equipment like this now, commit to that purchase now, rather than let it get it more expensive down the road. I think that's one consideration philosophically. The second I'd also bookend that up against is, in light of the failed override, we committed to exercise fiscal strain. But in and about that override discussion, it was also made very clear that we were going to maintain a commitment to public safety. And I think by investing in our public safety equipment, we maintain that commitment as well. So I'm perplexed as I try to figure out which commitment to maintain here to the townspeople of Bourne.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meyer?
I'd like to make a motion to support the request for Article 10 for a new ambulance into it, and the funding source will be the use of the ambulance fund.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Blanton. Any discussion on that motion that's been made and seconded? I'll just add my 2 cents, and I think that the handwriting is on the wall. I think we've been explained that we are, as Mary Jane so eloquently stated earlier, that we're putting bad money after good. And I would think if we throw numbers around like 16K here and 16K there, and I think it'd be more prudent to use existing funding a little earlier and perhaps save some of the 16K for something else, and I can think of a number of things. So I would support that motion. Is there anyone else with any other comments before we take a vote? Hearing none, motion's been made and seconded to approve the request of Article 10 in the amount of $260,000 from the ambulance fund for the purchase of a new ambulance to replace ambulance 136. Seeing no further discussion on that motion, it's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
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 3-2, motion passes. Thank you all very much. And finally, Article 11. This is to see if the town will vote to appropriate transfer from available funds a sum of money to supplement the current fiscal 2016 regular annual expenses of the town, as voted under Article 3, which is the annual budget of the 2015 May annual town meeting, and amended under Article 3 of the annual budget as voted on the 2015 October special town meeting, or take any action there too. You want to kick us off, Tom, with a summary, and we can open up the discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. As we had discussed at our meeting last week, there were some items that we felt needed to be adjusted. We have worked very closely with the school department as well as it relates to some legitimate and substantial needs that they have also brought forward as a result of the override and the cuts and the things that they looked at that they needed to do. We also looked at our side of the budget, if you will, although we're trying to get away from that kind of discussion. on some things that we thought needed to be adjusted, and perhaps that were hit a little too hard, and not really understanding the full implication of the reductions that would be made. So, in in the town meeting warrant article that you had received on Friday, which has changed, the intent was to try to tighten that article up as much as possible so that we wouldn't be flexing out and opening the meeting up to a free-for-all, if you will. And we had talked about reinstating the bus driver at the Council on Aging for about $22,000 and helping out the library in a couple of areas. They still would have substantial reductions based on a percentage of their budget, enhancing theirs up to about $35,000. 7,900 into the town administrator's departmental salaries and wages to assure that we keep a half-time person in the budget that has been instrumental to us. The insurances, non-health insurance related bills that we have received that are over what the original budget is, and we get the budget early, and that's what it is a budget for $55,000. The school department has come in with some actual documented need of $139,916. And then, as you know, we've talked about booting up the snow and ice account. We had originally thought a little bit more, based on what this weekend may bring, we'll have to see, but by starting to step that up to an actual cost that we need and bringing it up $150,000 this year, and stepping it up again next year a little bit to bring it up to a more realistic line than $92,000 for a total of $409,382.
832 or 382?
$832, excuse me.
Just
Yep.
haven't been able to correct yet tonight. I wanted to get it in before the end of the meeting.
But you've been thinking about it. So, but that's where we are. Now, as a result of the Selectmen's meeting last week, and some discussions with members of the board over the course of Friday on the way home, and with discussions with the Finance Committee Chair on the way home, it seems to be appropriate that there were some will amongst some members of the board to discuss this in some more detail, to talk about some other things that may be looked at for this article. So we have in the warrant that you received this evening that I've dated 1/19/16, we have changed the wording of the article to transfer from available funds. It should be a sum of money, but the sum of money to supplement the FY16 annual expenses of the town. We did get an email later this afternoon from the moderator cautioning us that this, opens up Pandora box, but the selectmen can certainly discuss what they want to do to either augment this or reduce this or whatever it is they may want to do, and we can tighten it up when you're through.
Before we get into this, I'd just like to cover that one point. Originally, we had specified a figure of the original $409,832. If that had appeared in the article, would the town be able to spend more money than that?
Not into other line items, it would only be into those areas, because the article would be defined.
Okay.
Okay.
So does everybody understand why this has been changed?
I understand why it's been changed. I guess my big question is, can you define available funds, where that's coming from?
It will be from.
409?
From free cash,
It will come from free cash.
Okay.
the 409,832. That's the,
With the, there will be some offset, I just want to be very clear, there's some $51,000 that was set aside for a, HR coordinator's position that has not been filled, and it's been very clear that the selectmen are not so inclined to fill that, given the current state of affairs. So that would be helping to offset some of the costs here as well. Not all of it, because, well, it'd be all of it, but it would offset some of the costs here.
Mr. Picard and Mr. Blanton?
And after the 409,832 is removed from free cash, where does that leave us with our policy?
We're still within policy.
By-
And that is making a couple of assumptions within the budget. It's making the assumption we're gonna close on Cody, and we are gonna close on Cody. After we're all through, if you look at your long-term plan, that's in your budget, after we do this, we would still be able to spend the $1 million and still stay within the policy of the keeping 5% in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Peter had his hand up.
Myself and Michael, his hand was up first.
Mr. Blanton?
No, thank you very much, but actually, Don just asked my question, so thank you very much for that, Don.
Mr. Meyer?
I was one of the movers that asked for this Article 11 to be streamlined, because I wanted some discretion going into possible adjustments to this budget. We've had discussions online, in person, over the last few weeks, probably a few months at sometimes, about this building that we sit in being cut back because of the failed override. In my opinion, that may have been a wise decision back in October or September when we went through the process, but in reality, this is the one building that serves all generations, if it's children all the way up to the elderly. And the fact that we may have some discretionary income to look at getting this building open longer hours or go back to the way that it was scheduled before, is something I think we should look at. Now, when I sat with the town administrator last week and the rec director and the finance and the facilities director, I asked for a cost for the rest of this fiscal year to put a custodian back in this building, to keep this building open to back to the hours. It was, that used to be scheduled at, it was roughly $18,000 I was given as a figure for the rest of FY16, and that it would be roughly $50,000 or $51,000 or $54,000 for FY17 to keep this building open in its entirety back to the older, back to the way it used to be. I know when this override went down, we were told that if we, people were coming up, well, if you end up putting some of these cuts back that you originally approved, then it means that you found money and that you've been snookering us all on. That was not the case. What it is we have some turnbacks that were higher than normal, and you'll see in future years, turnbacks are not gonna be as high. We're gonna have to spend every dollar we can get to keep the services going. But I think one of the things that I think we overlooked when we went through this scenario, it's the effect on what it would cost the people to, the effect of the impacts of this building being closed and what the outcry is in the community. And now you're gonna hear other people say there really hasn't been an outcry. Yes, there has been. I mean, to a point now that we got people in the building 7, 8 o'clock at night over the COA, and potentially it may be unsafe for them to be here that time of night. If you're over that side of the building and you're asking Tracy or Sherry or someone comes off the street and they're not in the best state of mind, they're gonna have to pick up the phone or call the police, or they're gonna have to scream for help. There's not even a button down there that I have to press for them to get the police over there if they panic or they need help. I mean, you are changing these people, you're changing working conditions, and I just feel that for the short term, this building should go back to the way it was. If we add the $18,000 to the $409,832, it comes out to $427,832, and I think it's money well spent.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Was that statement true, that we have council on aging working past 4:30?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was not aware of that. Mr. Ellis?
If I could just, we talked about that where we were going to be able to, by staying open later at night.
Well, I'm not sure, I was not part of the conversation last week. as you
Well,
might
this
recall.
wasn't last week. This
Okay.
was, this
I
was-
must have,
we were gonna be offering additional outreach hours
yeah,
to our folks that may be working poor, that utilize fuel assistance and other things, and we'd be able to do some of our outreach by having our outreach people here a couple nights after regular work hours, so they wouldn't have, folks who need those services would be able to come in after
I just
work.
didn't realize who they were. Thank you. Yep. Mr. Ellis?
I understand Peter's concern. My concern is lifeguards at the beaches. So I have an additional thing that I'm concerned about that didn't get funded, won't be funded, and is in difficulty. And it's also a young person, young people that'll be affected by this on the beach. And we are a seagoing community, and I'm seriously concerned about the young people down at the beach. And today, sometimes people aren't as attentive as they should be. So I can appreciate what Mr.
This,
Myers, thank you. But I had a brain thing there. Mr. Myers saying, but my thing is, I'm very concerned about having lifeguards at the different beaches. So we all have our priorities in different things.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Gentlemen, what I'd like to do, if we could, why don't we start with the base, discuss the original 409,832 figure, take a vote on that, and then open up further discussion for any additional adjustments that the board members or any member of the audience might like to take, and go from there, if that would be agreeable to you all. Only because it's gonna take care of the base, and then you're done. Unless you want to make adjustments to the base, and I take that as part of the consideration of that original article as presented. So if you're feeling that we should subtract money from out of one of those line items that Mr. Greeno read to help offset either one of the discussions that we've had, it was an $18,000 increase to the FY16 budget for the operating of the community center. Is that your intention, Mr. Meyer?
couldn't, may I ask a question, Mr.
Certainly.
Chairman? Couldn't, based on our free cash and being in compliance with our policy, I doubt that $18,000 from additional free cash to make $427,832 for the year fiscal 2016, I don't think that's that big a deal.
I'm just suggesting it as a way to approach
No,
the
no,
article, that's all.
You're
It's
the
up to
chairman,
you.
I'm just making a recommendation.
It may be slightly less as we move forward and they're able, because of when the date of the town meeting is, you know, and getting it ramped up, but that's about what we were looking at, yes.
Why don't we just add the 18? Well, I can,
Well, I'd like to, I don't support the 18. That's one of the reasons why I'm presenting this, is because I think we should get the base of the 409,832 as originally presented, and then we can talk about the merits of any additional subtractions or additions. The reason I'm suggesting that is because even if you don't spend the 18, or if you do spend the 18, your long-term plan shows that you're going significantly negative in 18. This isn't free. You're taking free cash out of an account that's gonna be expended completely within a year. 17 is balanced, but it's balanced with a significant amount of free cash.
well, we can also look at going from 150 to 130, or 132 on the snow and
On
ice.
the snow and ice, excellent idea, but you know what that's gonna do? You're gonna take the free cash out at the special town meeting to pay for all the money you've spent, maybe next weekend, in free cash. Again.
Well, I
I'm just
mean,
against any additional expenditures. If I had my way, not to prolong this, I would have put $250,000 in snow and ice.
But then they're forcing that to be the minimum increase every year, when in some years, you may not have a snowstorm.
And it would go back as a turnback, as you know.
Yeah, as a term back, you're tying up money that could be spent elsewhere.
We were almost $900,000 short in our snow and ice in the last 2 years.
I know, but that's, you know, we don't know what's gonna happen the rest of the year, but New England weather is so unpredictable. We don't know from one year to the next.
All right, how much have we expended so far this year out of the $92,000 budget for snow and ice? Is it $122,000?
Well, I don't know what the last storm
Right.
cost, okay, but Come on, George, if you get, I know we spent about $108,000 to buy salt before we even got
Before
going.
it even snowed. And we've had 2 storms we've plowed for since. We're probably already 4, sorry. We've plowed
Been
4
fo-
times.
Yeah, we haven't plowed 4 times, but we've been out salting or sanding 4
Yeah.
times.
I think we're kidding ourselves, gentlemen, if we think that we're gonna get by with an additional 150K. But that's just, I'm just saying, what I'm trying to do is to get through the discussion of the original additions and modifications to FY16, and then discuss anything else you'd like to discuss, lifeguards and so forth, that's all. I don't want to bury it. I'd just like to get through with it.
I mean,
I'd
everything,
entertain a motion.
I will move, Mr. Chairman, that the board approves the amount of $409,830 for the preliminary pass at the Article 11 for the 2016 budget
From free cash.
from free cash.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. Is there a second to
I'll
that?
second that.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a motion that's been made and seconded to approve the adjustments to the fiscal 16 budget as referenced in the original Articles 11. I'll just read those down. Council on Aging, salaries and wages for a bus driver, $22,000. Library salaries and wages, $15,000. Library expenses, $20,000. Town administrative salaries and wages, $7,916. Non-health insurance additions, $55,000. The school budget, $139,916. Snow and ice expenses, $150,000 for a grand total of the $409,832 to be transferred from free cash. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Are we going to discuss any augmentation at this point?
Absolutely. Oh, no, I was gonna wait till we do that after. I'm just trying to get through, because of the late hour and so forth, and just to keep it clean relative to what, anything that happens, whether it's from this side of the table or the other side.
Then I would support this motion with the understanding that we will
Yep,
continue to
absolutely
have that
entertain that,
conversation.
yep.
Thank
I'm
you.
not trying to deflect it, I'm just trying to
Streamline it.
streamline it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of transferring from free cash the amount of $409,832 to the existing fiscal year 16 operating budget as outlined, please say aye.
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 And all opposed? Was that unanimous?
Yep.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Meyer and then Mr. Greeno.
I'd like to make a motion to, a separate motion to take $18,000 out of free cash for the purposes of, I don't know what line item it goes to, but, is it,
Supplementing the operational salaries and wages of the
community
center.
yes.
building.
Second that
Well,
motion.
And
Before we, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Greeno.
there's 2 things that I want to bring up before Jonathan. For the motion at the town meeting, it may be not just from free cash, it may be from other available funds.
Absolutely.
We're looking at article closeouts, we're looking
Yep.
at a whole bunch of other things in an effort to try to help this out.
We know what the intention is, okay.
Yes, I know the intention, I just want, the motion says from free cash, the final motion may be something different.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we'll be meeting shortly before the town meeting, so we can make those adjustments in the motions that are presented at town meeting if they're not the same as the finance committee. Okay.
Oh, can we,
I just want to make a recommendation. It would not be to salaries and wages, it would be to expenses.
Expenses,
Please.
because it's a contracted.
We would use a contracted
Okay,
service.
thank you.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna
Thank
go
you
with
very
that, thanks, John.
there's a
Okay.
motion, is there, someone second it?
I second it.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded to utilize $18,000 from available funds to add to the expense portion of the community center's operating budget for the purpose of hiring an additional,
No, for expenses.
it was a,
Custodians for.
expenses for additional contract work to open hours for the community center.
Yep.
All right. Any discussion on that motion?
I wonder if the, either facilities or rec director had any opinions to weigh in on that.
I'm sorry, what,
Did you want to speak, Chris Ann, at all?
on the,
On the 18,000 for the additional? Okay. Jonathan?
No, I'm all set. I think
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, Mr.
Meyer?
No. No. Mr. Ellis, had talked about lifeguards, I think you should have the costs so that you know what they are.
Well, let's, if we could,
let's go
Mr.
into
Chairman,
motion.
let's do this first.
Okay.
If we could, because I think it
Right.
is less confusing, and I have questions on that as well,
Okay.
because I'll support lifeguards.
Okay, any discussion on the motion, Mr. Meyer's motion that's been made and seconded to appropriate $18,000 for the community center custodial contract expense line item? Hearing none. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes 4-1.
Now you know what it feels like to be the one.
Thank you, Mr. Picard.
I usually get that. I usually get that privilege.
Okay. Mr. Ellis, did you want to present an additional adjustment?
You want the numbers, Jerry?
Yeah, do you have those numbers?
Yeah.
Could I make a request?
Yeah, go
May I
ahead,
just, could we find out number one? Because I know if a successful, if we successfully reinstate lifeguards, there needs to be money in the 2016 budget.
I have that broken up.
What is that amount?
Chrisanne provided me the numbers this afternoon. It would be approximately $3,600 for June 23rd to June 30th. This includes hours required for training.
All right, and then the next amount, if the board, I presume it's either under priorities or it could be, whatever, to reinstate lifeguards.
Since there'll be no increase in salaries for the staff for the summer, whatever they made last year, it's $38,842.42. I would suggest that you make it at about $39,500, just because there may be some additions and subtractions to what we're doing.
That was what we spent last
Right.
summer, so you have to factor in your rain days and things like that.
You're right, so, yeah. The other thing that I would ask the selectmen, if they're going to do this, and I'd have to ask Linda how we do this, but since the swim lessons that we indicated in my budget message would be provided at fee base only, I would ask that the selectmen also consider a sum of about, this is just Tom, not the rec director, but I think she concurs, of about $6,000 to help offset scholarships for those children that may not be able to afford the fee. I need to know how to be able to put that into the budget. I don't know exactly how that goes into donations or revolving or whatever, but I
That would go into 17, correct?
correct.
All right, so that we don't need to address that now, but you can, and keep in the back of your minds that request may come
Well,
forward.
you can figure out a way to do it. I was gonna make a motion for 17 under our priorities.
Okay, but for 16,
but-
do you want to make?
No,
the-
let Jerry, if you want to make a motion of adding the 3,600 for lifeguard.
I'm sorry, what?
That was an actual, if we start earlier or it's really hot.
The number of days may be a little different, all
A
right.
bit more, I would maybe go to
What?
40, all right, I had 4,400.
4,400.
Okay.
I actually had 4,400 written.
Motion, we increase. Oh, sorry.
Jerry, 4,400 for okay.
Okay, so you want
So I
to
have
make
a
a motion,
motion,
Jerry?
I have a motion from Mr. Ellis to add an additional $4,400 for lifeguards in fiscal 16.
Second.
I have 2 seconds. Mr. Picard seconded that motion. Any discussion on that motion? Mr. Blanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd have to concur with my colleagues in favor of this one. It's absolutely essential that we maintain our commitment to have safe beaches here on a Cape Side town. I've argued vehemently for this on town meeting floor years past. It would be a shame for the residents here to lose the benefit, not only the safety benefit, but also the educational benefit.
Thank you.
Thank you for making
Yeah,
the
I
motion.
was gonna,
Mr. Picard?
if I may, Mr. Chairman, in my 70-plus years here on the board, there has been 3 hot topics that generate participation at these meetings. Generally, we have Mr. Mulvey and the press and a few others, but a few years back, there was the out halls for down in Patchawisset. There's the wind turbines that are ongoing. And then when I was chairman, I got to sit through the meeting when the lifeguard people came out of the woodwork, and it was akin to having a root canal, in my opinion. But they had their, and that was just my personal, I don't think we thought it through. I think that there needs to be lifeguards at a couple of beaches. We can, and I'm going by what Mary Jane Mastrangelo told me. We didn't feel at one point in time within the last year that we as a board could tell the administrator, don't cut this position, cut this position. It's his under the daily operating budget. But we can, as a matter of policy, say it is the position of the Board of Selectmen to fund lifeguards. And then how he does it is up to him.
Right.
So I'm going to support that. I don't know where you're going to take it out of. I'm going to take it out of existing salaries and expenses or whatever you got to do, but you can find a place, I think. So in any case, I agree with my colleagues. I'm glad they brought it up. I sound like Mr. Blanton now. I agree with my colleagues.
I couldn't, Mr. Blanton, I couldn't let that go. That was just,
So, that's a great time. Your review's coming up in a couple of months.
Okay, gentlemen. I've got a motion has been made and seconded to add an additional $4,400 to the FY16 budget for the purpose of adding lifeguard preparations to the recreational budget. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved 4-1. The chair votes no, for the same reasons as the previous. Is there any other adjustments you would like to recommend at this time for fiscal 16? Any from the audience? Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
What do you go to, Gold's now or privates?
We could put the budget priority discussions. Is there any discussions under that particular, or was that really to discuss the lifeguards and the adjustment?
Right.
for-
Under what?
Under the budget
that
priority
was
discussion?
really just to move that ahead.
That's fiscal 2017, if you'd
Right.
like, Mr. Chairman. I mean, as my priority for the budget, and I think this is probably the only one I'm going to have, is that I would move that the Board of Selectmen adopt as policy the lifeguard program for FY17, and how that is administered is up to the town administrator.
Second.
I want to put a number with that, if I could. We've received a number,
We received a recommendation of $39,500.
$39,500.
Plus 6 for scholarship?
Plus 6%.
Yeah, 44, I'd make it an even
$44,000.
$50,000.
Yep.
And I'm not sure about how we're gonna be able to make the scholarships work. It may come back to 44, but I just wanna be sure that no child is denied the opportunity.
Let me offer before we start throwing motions around. What if we understood that this evening we discussed the fact that we've identified and added monies in to prepare for bringing lifeguards for fiscal 17, and then if we get into the budgets in fiscal 17, we attack the specifics within that with the understanding that the priority is to add lifeguards.
Understood.
I'd be comfortable with that.
All right? Do we want to take a few extra minutes tonight to give Mr. Bland and Mr. Meyer an opportunity to go through the long overdue, long awaited goals presentation?
Question.
Mr. Mr. Meyer?
As far, we did a policy and understand that lifeguards will be going forward for FY17. Should we make a motion or the assumption that the operations of this building could be possibly the same thing for FY17
It
as
is
well?
my understanding that that money will carry into 17, Mr. Meyer.
Okay.
We will,
But I'll note as chair, I'll note that being a priority, and when we get into discussions and the specifics within 17, I will make sure we bring that up.
yes.
Okay.
I will find another $50,000, so now I find $100,000 in the budget.
Well, we got an
The
auction coming
superintendent
up.
of schools is smiling
The
broadly.
auction doesn't get applied till next year.
Okay,
And I've already assumed the money from
Thank you.
the school.
he does. Do you want to take a little more extra time, gentlemen, to go through the goals presentation by Mr. Blanton and Mr. Warner? Or do you wanna-
Michael, it's your show because I left my sheet at home.
I'd gladly entertain a motion to adjourn otherwise.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and
We are
seconded.
meeting the 26th.
Yes, we are. Big night on the 26th. And there'll be an executive session on the 26th as well.
There will be an executive session on the 26th at 6 o'clock. Please mark your calendars.
All right. So
Okay.
are we meeting next week?
We are meeting next week with an executive session at 6 o'clock
In a regular business?
and a regular business meeting.
Okay.
We will be meeting on February 2nd. We are not meeting on February 9th.
Correct.
So you can all take me out for my birthday dinner on the
Nice, all right.
Nice.